The sky above Montana was unusually dark that evening, the kind of darkness that felt heavier than usual. Jason Carter stood in his backyard, staring up at the stars, or rather, where the stars should have been. A strange haze had settled over the horizon, dimming their light. He wiped grease from his hands onto a rag, his mind uneasy. Something didn't feel right. Inside the house, Laura Bennett sat on the couch, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her sweater. She had come over to borrow some tools earlier, but now she couldn't bring herself to leave. The news reports weren't helping either. Every channel showed the same thing. Images of massive ships descending from the sky, hovering silently over cities across the globe. Governments were scrambling, scientists were baffled, and ordinary people like Jason and Laura were left wondering what this meant for them. "They're not saying much," Laura said finally, breaking the silence. "Just that we need to stay calm." Jason snorted as he walked back inside, dropping the rag on the kitchen counter. "Stay calm. How are we supposed to do that when those things just show up out of nowhere?" He gestured toward the window, though neither of them needed to look to know what he meant. The alien ships were impossible to ignore, their sleek metallic surfaces glinting faintly even in the dim light. They looked like something out of a movie, except this wasn't fiction. This was real. Laura sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know, Jason. Maybe they really did come in peace. I mean, they haven't attacked yet, have they?" "Not yet," Jason muttered under his breath. He didn't trust it. Nothing about this situation made sense. Why would an advanced civilization travel across space just to park itself above Earth? And why now? It all felt too convenient, too calculated. But before he could say anything else, the television screen flickered, and a new message began broadcasting. The voice was deep, almost mechanical, speaking in perfect English. "People of Earth," it began, "we are the Veyrak. We come with a purpose. Your world holds resources vital to our survival. You will provide these resources willingly, or you will be compelled to do so. Resistance is futile." The room went silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade away. Laura stared at the screen, her face pale. "Compelled," she whispered. "What does that even mean?" Jason clenched his fists. "It means they don't care what we think. They're telling us straight up. They're taking whatever they want." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it an eerie stillness. Then Laura stood abruptly, pacing back and forth. "This can't happen. They can't just take over. There has to be something we can do." Jason shook his head. "Do? Against them? Look at those ships, Laura. They've got technology we can't even dream of. If they wanted to wipe us out, they could have done it already. But they haven't." Laura shot back, her voice rising slightly. "That means there's a chance. There's always a chance." Jason wanted to argue, but he stopped himself. Deep down, he knew she was right. As long as there was breath in their lungs, giving up wasn't an option. Still, the enormity of the situation weighed heavily on him. These weren't just invaders, they were superior in every way. What hope did humanity really have? As the night wore on, the two of them continued watching the news, piecing together snippets of information. Reports poured in from around the world, sightings of smaller vessels descending into cities, sightings of strange beings clad in shimmering armor. Some countries tried negotiating, while others prepared for war. None of it mattered. The Veyrak remained unmoved, their presence an unyielding force. By morning, the reality had sunk in. Life as they knew it was over. For Jason and Laura, uncertainty loomed large, but one thing was clear. Whatever happened next, they wouldn't face it alone. The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and fear. Across the globe, the Veyrak envoys began appearing in major cities, their towering forms stepping out of sleek landing craft. They moved with precision, their movements almost mechanical, as if every step had been calculated long before they arrived. In New York City, crowds gathered to watch, some curious, others terrified. Among them was Ryan Mitchell, an FBI agent who had been called in to monitor the situation. His jaw tightened as he observed the aliens from a distance, his instincts screaming that nothing about this was normal. Beside him stood Dr. Elena Torres, a linguist who had spent most of her career studying ancient languages. She clutched a notepad tightly in her hands, jotting down notes as the Veyrac delivered their message once again. "Your cooperation is required," the lead-in voice said, its voice echoing through the streets. "Resistance will result in consequences." The words were calm, but there was an underlying threat that sent shivers down Elena's spine. "They're not even trying to hide it," Ryan muttered under his breath. "This isn't negotiation. It's a takeover." Elena nodded, though her focus remained on the aliens. She studied their body language, the way they held themselves, and the subtle shifts in their posture when they spoke. There was something off about them, something she couldn't quite put into words. "Their speech patterns are too perfect," she said after a moment. "It's like they've rehearsed this for years." Ryan glanced at her, his brow furrowed. "You think they planned this? That they knew exactly how we'd react?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "But I do know one thing. They're not telling us everything." Back in Montana, Jason Carter and Laura Bennett listened to the same broadcast on the radio. The news painted a grim picture. Governments were folding under pressure, agreeing to the Veyrac's demands without much of a fight. Supplies were being shipped out, people were being rounded up for processing, and dissent was met with swift punishment. It was clear the aliens weren't interested in diplomacy. They wanted control, plain and simple. "This isn't going to end well," Laura said, shaking her head as she stirred a pot of soup on the stove. "They're treating us like cattle." Jason leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "That's because that's what we are to them. Resources, livestock, whatever you want to call it. They don't see us as equals." Laura turned to face him, her expression determined. "Then we can't let them win. Not without a fight." Jason hesitated. He admired her spirit, but the odds were stacked so heavily against them. How could two ordinary people stand up to an entire alien fleet? Still, he couldn't deny the spark of defiance growing inside him. If enough people felt the same way, maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference. Meanwhile, back in New York, Ryan and Elena worked tirelessly to uncover more about the Veyrac. Using fragments of their language and intercepted transmissions, Elena started piecing together their communication patterns. It was slow, painstaking work, but she was onto something. One night, while poring over her notes, she noticed a recurring phrase embedded in their messages. At first, it seemed insignificant, but the more she analyzed it, the clearer its meaning became. "Ryan," she whispered urgently, pulling him aside. "I think I found something." He leaned closer, his eyes scanning the paper she held up. "What is it?" "It's a frequency," she explained. "They keep referencing it in their communications. I think it might be tied to their technology somehow." Ryan's mind raced. If they could figure out what the frequency did, it might give humanity a fighting chance. But time was running out. The Veyrac were growing bolder, their methods harsher. People were disappearing, entire neighborhoods were being emptied, and resistance was brutally crushed. Whatever hope remained rested on fragile shoulders, and on the slim possibility that someone, somewhere, could find a way to turn the tide. As the days passed, small acts of rebellion began cropping up around the world. Graffiti appeared on walls, messages of defiance scrawled in bold letters. Underground networks formed, sharing information and supplies. And in quiet corners of the planet, people like Jason, Laura, Ryan, and Elena prepared for what was coming next. None of them knew if they'd succeed, but one thing was certain. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. Weeks had passed since the Veyrac's arrival, and their true intentions became impossible to ignore. What started as demands for resources quickly escalated into something far more sinister. Across the globe, people were being taken from their homes, forced into labor camps, and stripped of their freedoms. The aliens showed no mercy, no hesitation. Their actions made it clear humanity was nothing more than a means to an end. In Montana, Jason Carter and Laura Bennett witnessed the brutality firsthand when a group of townsfolk organized a peaceful protest in the nearby city of Billings. Armed with signs and hope, they gathered in the square, chanting slogans like, "We are not your slaves," and "Earth belongs to us." At first, the Veyrac seemed indifferent, watching silently from their hovering ships. But then, without warning, the aliens struck. Bright beams of light shot down from the sky, scattering the crowd. People screamed as others were lifted off the ground, paralyzed by some invisible force, and dragged into waiting vessels. Jason and Laura watched from a distance, hidden behind a row of buildings. Laura's hands trembled as she clutched her sign, tears streaming down her face. "They didn't even give them a chance," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jason clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. "This isn't going to stop unless we make it stop." That night, back at Jason's house, the two of them sat in silence, trying to process what they'd seen. The television played softly in the background, showing footage of similar crackdowns happening worldwide. Governments that had initially resisted were now bowing to the Veyrac's demands, too afraid, or too powerless, to fight back. It felt like the entire world was giving up. "We can't just sit here," Laura said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "There has to be others out there who feel the same way we do, people who want to fight back." Jason nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. Over the past few days, he'd heard whispers of underground resistance groups forming in secret, ordinary people coming together to resist the Veyrac's rule. Maybe it was time they joined one. The next morning, Jason and Laura drove to a remote farmhouse on the outskirts of town. A man named Sam Porter lived there, or so they'd heard. He was rumored to be part of a local resistance cell. When they arrived, Sam greeted them cautiously, his weathered face lined with worry. After hearing their story, he agreed to let them join. But only after making one thing clear. "This isn't going to be easy," Sam warned. "The Veyrac don't play fair. If you get caught, they won't hesitate to kill you. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Jason met his gaze without flinching. "I'm sure." Laura nodded firmly. "Me too." As the days turned into weeks, Jason and Laura threw themselves into the resistance. They learned how to move unnoticed, how to gather supplies, and how to communicate using coded messages. Laura used her knowledge of chemistry to experiment with makeshift weapons, while Jason's mechanical skills proved invaluable for repairing old equipment scavenged from abandoned warehouses. Meanwhile, in New York City, Ryan Mitchell and Dr. Elena Torres continued their own efforts to uncover the Veyrac's secrets. Elena had discovered that the frequency mentioned in their communications might be linked to their technology's power source. If they could disrupt it, they might disable the aliens' weapons, or even their ships. Ryan took this information to a trusted contact within the FBI, hoping to rally support. But the response was disheartening. "We're stretched too thin," his superior told him. "If we try anything big, we'll just get crushed." Frustrated but undeterred, Ryan decided to take matters into his own hands. He reached out to underground networks, sharing Elena's findings with anyone willing to listen. Slowly, a plan began to form. A risky, dangerous plan that would require coordination across multiple cities. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Across the globe, small acts of rebellion grew bolder. Sabotage missions targeted Veyrac supply lines, graffiti spread messages of defiance, and whispers of hope traveled through hidden channels. Humanity was bruised and battered, but it wasn't broken yet. For every person taken, another rose to take their place. And though the odds were stacked against them, people like Jason, Laura, Ryan, and Elena refused to give up. Because deep down, They all knew one thing: surrender wasn't an option. The resistance was gaining momentum, but the stakes were higher than ever. Jason and Laura worked tirelessly with Sam Porter and his group, turning the old farmhouse into a makeshift headquarters. Maps covered the walls, marked with locations of Verac facilities, supply routes, and suspected labor camps. Laura spent hours in the basement, mixing chemicals and testing homemade explosives, while Jason tinkered with scavenged electronics, trying to build tools that could give them an edge. One evening, as the team gathered around a table cluttered with plans and supplies, Sam shared some news. "We got word from New York," he said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "Someone named Ryan Mitchell passed along information about the Verax tech. Apparently, they'd got a weak spot." Jason leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What kind of weak spot?" Sam unfolded the note and placed it on the table. "Their ships and weapons rely on some kind of electromagnetic frequency. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to disable them, at least temporarily." Laura's face lit up with excitement. "That's perfect. We've been working on something like that. If we tweak the EMP device Jason built, we could amplify its range." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "It won't be easy. These things need precision timing and calibration. But if it works, it'll give us a fighting chance." Laura finished for him, her voice firm. In New York, Ryan and Elena were busy refining their own version of the plan. Elena had spent sleepless nights analyzing intercepted transmissions, piecing together details about the frequency the Verac used. She believed it wasn't just tied to their weapons, it was essential to their biology as well. "If we hit them with the right pulse," she explained to Ryan, pointing at her notes, "it could overload their systems, maybe even incapacitate them." Ryan frowned, considering the risks. "But how do we get close enough to test it? They've got those ships locked down tighter than Fort Knox." Elena hesitated before answering. "We'll have to infiltrate one of their bases. There's no other way." Though the idea terrified him, Ryan knew she was right. He reached out to contacts within the underground network, organizing a team to help carry out the mission. The goal was simple: sneak into a heavily guarded Verac facility, deploy the EMP device, and escape before the aliens realized what was happening. Back in Montana, Jason and Laura prepared for their part in the operation. Sam had assigned them to target a smaller outpost near their town, believing it would serve as a good test run for the larger assault planned elsewhere. Armed with crude weapons and the modified EMP device, the team set out under the cover of darkness. The outpost loomed ahead, surrounded by a high fence topped with strange, glowing wires. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements methodical and precise. Jason signaled for the others to wait while he scouted the area, memorizing guard patterns and identifying weak points in the fence. When he returned, Laura handed him a small bag filled with smoke bombs. "Use these to create a distraction," she whispered. "I'll stay here and monitor the device. Once you're inside, I'll activate it remotely." Jason nodded, gripping the bag tightly. "Be careful." As the team moved into position, adrenaline coursed through their veins. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. If they succeeded, they'd prove that humanity still had a fighting chance. If they failed, well, none of them wanted to think about that. At Jason's signal, the smoke bombs went off, sending thick clouds billowing into the air. The guards scrambled, confused by the sudden chaos. Seizing the opportunity, Jason and two others slipped through a gap in the fence, heading straight for the main building. Inside, they found rows of strange machinery humming with energy. Jason planted the EMP device near the center of the room, then signaled for Laura to activate it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening crackle, the lights flickered and died. The hum of the machine ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Outside, the glowing wires on the fence dimmed, and the guards froze, their bodies trembling as if struck by an invisible force. It worked. Laura breathed into her radio, her voice shaking with relief. "You did it." But the victory was short-lived. Alarms blared in the distance, and red warning lights began flashing. The Veyrak weren't done yet, and neither was the Resistance. The success of the EMP device at the outpost was a small but significant win for the Resistance. Word of their achievement spread quickly through underground networks, inspiring others to take action. Jason and Laura's team became a symbol of hope, proof that the Veyrak weren't invincible. But with every victory came new dangers, and the aliens were growing more aggressive in response. Back at the farmhouse, the group celebrated briefly before diving back into planning. Sam warned them not to get complacent. "They'll come after us now," he said, pacing the room. That outpost wasn't just some random spot. It was part of their supply chain. When they find out it's been hit, they'll retaliate. Jason nodded grimly. He knew Sam was right. The Veyrak weren't just powerful, they were ruthless. Any sign of defiance would be met with overwhelming force. Still, the team couldn't afford to slow down. They had momentum on their side, and they needed to use it wisely. But trouble struck sooner than anyone expected. A few days later, as Jason and Laura worked on improving the EMP device, Alex Monroe, a member of the Resistance, arrived at the farmhouse unannounced. Alex had joined the group weeks earlier, claiming to have military experience. At first, he seemed reliable, even helpful. But something about him had always felt off to Jason. "I heard you're planning another strike," Alex said casually, leaning against the doorway. His tone was friendly, but his eyes darted around the room, taking in the maps and equipment scattered across the table. "Yeah, we are," Jason replied cautiously. He didn't trust Alex enough to share details. "Why?" Alex shrugged. "Just curious. Thought I might help." Laura glanced at Jason, her expression uneasy. She didn't like Alex either, though she hadn't said much about it until now. "We've got it covered," she said firmly. "Thanks anyway." Later that night, as everyone settled in for sleep, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He decided to double-check their security measures, walking the perimeter of the property with a flashlight. That's when he spotted it. Fresh tire tracks leading away from the farmhouse, heading toward the main road. Someone had been here, and recently. His heart sank as realization dawned. Alex was gone. Before Jason could warn the others, the sound of engines roared in the distance. Headlights pierced the darkness, followed by the unmistakable hum of Veyrak ships descending overhead. Chaos erupted as the farmhouse was surrounded. Guards poured out of vehicles, armed with weapons that glowed ominously in the night. "Everyone, move," Sam shouted, grabbing a rifle. "Get to the tunnels." The group scrambled to escape, diving into hidden underground passages they dug as a contingency plan. Bullets whizzed past as they ran, the air thick with smoke and panic. Laura clutched the EMP device tightly, refusing to let it fall into enemy hands. Jason stayed close, covering her as they made their way to safety. When they finally emerged miles away, exhausted and shaken, the full weight of the betrayal hit them. Alex had sold them out. Their location, their plans, all of it had been handed over to the Veyrak. Several members of the group had been captured or killed in the ambush, and the farmhouse was likely destroyed. As they regrouped in a secluded cabin deep in the woods, anger and grief hung heavy in the air. Sam clenched his fists, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "We can't trust anyone anymore," he growled. "Not even ourselves." Laura sat quietly, tears streaming down her face. She thought of the friends they'd lost, the lives shattered because of one man's greed. How could he do this? She whispered, her voice breaking. Jason knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "He chose the easy way out," he said bitterly. "But we're still here, and we're not done fighting." In New York, Ryan received word of the attack. He felt sick knowing how close they'd come to losing everything. Elena tried to reassure him, but even she couldn't hide her fear. "If the Veyrak know about the EMP device," she said softly, "they'll do everything they can to stop us." Ryan nodded, determination hardening in his eyes. Then we'll have to move faster. We can't let them win. Though battered and bruised, the resistance refused to give up. They buried their dead, tended to their wounded, and prepared for the next battle. Betrayal had cost them dearly, but it hadn't broken them. Humanity's fight for survival was far from over, and neither was their will to resist. The betrayal by Alex Monroe left deep scars on the resistance, but it also hardened their resolve. Jason and Laura knew they couldn't afford another mistake. Every decision, every move, had to be carefully planned. In the days following the attack on the farmhouse, the group worked tirelessly to regroup and adapt. They set up a new base in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, hidden from prying eyes. The location wasn't ideal, but it was safe for now. Sam took charge of tightening security, implementing strict protocols to ensure no one else could infiltrate their ranks. From now on, he said during a meeting, we only trust people we've known for years. No exceptions. Jason agreed, though the weight of leadership pressed heavily on him. He wasn't used to being in charge, but someone had to step up. Laura stood by his side, her quiet strength a constant source of support. Together, they poured their energy into refining the EMP device, determined to make it more powerful and reliable. Meanwhile, in New York, Ryan and Alina continued their efforts to decipher the Verax technology. Using the data gathered from previous missions, Alina identified patterns in the aliens' electromagnetic signals. She believed that if they synchronized multiple EMP devices and triggered them simultaneously, they could create a chain reaction capable of disabling entire fleets of ships. It's risky, she admitted, showing Ryan her calculations. But if we time it right, we might be able to cripple their operations long enough for humanity to strike back. Ryan nodded, understanding the stakes. We'll need teams in different locations to pull this off. If even one device fails, the whole plan falls apart. Alina sighed, rubbing her temples. I know, but we don't have a choice. This is our best shot. With time running out, the Resistance devised a bold plan. Small teams would infiltrate key Verac facilities across the globe, planting EMP devices in strategic locations. The goal was to launch a coordinated attack, overwhelming the aliens with simultaneous disruptions to their systems. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. Jason volunteered to lead the Montana team, knowing the risks involved. If something happens to me, he told Laura before leaving, you take over. Promise me you'll keep fighting. Laura shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Nothing's going to happen to you. We're doing this together. As the day of the operation approached, tension filled the air. Supplies were packed, weapons checked, and final instructions given. Everyone understood what was at stake. Success meant hope for humanity. Failure meant certain doom. The night before the mission, Laura sat alone in the factory, staring at the EMP device. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. Could they really pull this off? What if they were walking into a trap? She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. Giving in to fear wouldn't help anyone. Jason found her there and sat down beside her. You okay? He asked gently. I'm scared, she admitted. What if we're not strong enough? Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. We are strong enough. Look at everything we've already done. We've survived against impossible odds. That's something the Verac don't understand. They don't know how resilient we are. His words gave her comfort, but the uncertainty lingered. Both of them knew the mission would be dangerous, possibly fatal. Yet neither hesitated. They had chosen this path, and they would see it through to the end. Across the country, Ryan prepared for his role in the operation. He would lead a team into Los Angeles, targeting a major Verac command center. Alina stayed behind to monitor communications and coordinate timing between the teams. Though she hated being separated from Ryan, she knew her skills were needed elsewhere. As dawn broke, the Resistance sprang into action. Teams moved silently through the shadows, avoiding patrols and slipping past guards. Jason's group reached their target without incident, planting the EMP device near the heart of the facility. Laura activated it remotely, holding her breath as the countdown began. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening crackle, the lights flickered and died. The hum of alien machinery faded into silence. Cheers erupted among the team, but Jason quickly silenced them. "Stay sharp," he warned. "This isn't over yet." Far away, Ryan's team achieved similar success, disabling the command center in Los Angeles. One by one, reports came in from other locations. The plan was working, but the Veyrak weren't about to surrender. Alarms blared, and reinforcements arrived, forcing the resistance to fight their way out. Though battered and exhausted, the teams managed to escape, retreating to safety. The first wave of attacks had succeeded, but the battle was far from won. The Veyrak were angry now, and they wouldn't stop until every last human was under their control or dead. Despite the odds, the resistance refused to back down. They had struck a blow, and they intended to keep striking until freedom was theirs again. The success of the first wave of attacks gave the resistance a fleeting sense of hope, but it was short-lived. The Veyrak's response was swift and brutal. Enraged by the disruptions to their systems, they unleashed a wave of destruction unlike anything humanity had seen before. Cities burned as alien ships descended, firing beams of energy that reduced buildings to rubble. The skies lit up with explosions, and the air was thick with smoke and screams. Jason and his team barely escaped with their lives after planting the EMP device in Montana. As they fled the facility, they were ambushed by Veyrak patrols. Bullets flew, and the group scattered, diving for cover behind debris. Laura stayed close to Jason, clutching the detonator tightly in her hand. "We can't stop now," she shouted over the chaos. "If we don't get out of here, everything we've done will be for nothing." "I know," Jason yelled back, firing blindly at the advancing aliens. He could see the desperation in their glowing eyes, their movements faster and more aggressive than before. It was clear the Veyrak weren't holding back anymore. The team fought their way through the chaos, losing 2 members in the process. Each loss hit hard, but there was no time to grieve. Survival was the only priority. When they finally reached the edge of the facility, they found their vehicle destroyed, its wreckage still smoldering. Jason cursed under his breath. "We're on foot," he said, glancing at the others. "Stick together and move fast." Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Ryan and his team faced similar challenges. After disabling the command center, they were surrounded by Veyrak forces. Outnumbered and outgunned, they took refuge in an abandoned warehouse, using whatever they could find to fortify their position. Ryan worked quickly, setting traps and preparing makeshift explosives. "They'll come at us hard," he warned the group. "Stay alert." As night fell, the aliens launched their assault. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside, followed by the eerie hum of their weapons charging. Ryan held his breath, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the first wave of Veyrak breached the door, he triggered the traps, sending shards of metal flying into their ranks. The ambush bought them precious time, but the fight was far from over. Back at the factory, Alina monitored communications, her hands trembling as she listened to reports from across the globe. The Veyrak were retaliating with overwhelming force, targeting not just resistance fighters but civilians as well. Entire neighborhoods were being leveled, families torn apart. Alina felt helpless, unable to do anything but relay updates to the teams in the field. "We need to pull back," she said into her radio, her voice cracking with emotion. "You're outnumbered. If you stay, you'll be killed." Ryan's voice came through the speaker, calm but firm. "We're not leaving. Not until we finish what we started." Alina wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't change his mind. Instead, she focused on coordinating the next phase of the operation. Using satellite imagery, she identified weak points in the Veyrak's defenses, guiding the teams toward safer routes. It wasn't much, but it was all she could do. In Montana, Jason and Laura pushed forward despite the odds. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but they refused to give up. Along the way, they encountered other survivors, ordinary people who had lost everything but still clung to hope. Some joined their cause, swelling their numbers and renewing their strength. When they finally reached a safe house deep in the mountains, Jason collapsed onto the floor, his body aching from days of non-stop fighting. Laura sat beside him, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We survived." "For now," Jason replied, his tone grim. "But this isn't over. They'll keep coming until we stop them for good." Across the world, the Resistance dug in, preparing for the next round of battles. Though battered and bruised, they remained determined. Humanity had endured centuries of hardship, and they weren't about to let the Veyrak break them. The fight was far from won, but one thing was certain. Surrender was no longer an option. The Veyrak's retaliation left Earth scared and broken. Entire cities lay in ruins, their streets deserted except for the occasional patrol of alien soldiers. The air was thick with ash, and the once blue skies were now a dull gray. Humanity had been pushed to its limits, but the Resistance refused to back down. They regrouped in hidden bunkers, caves, and abandoned buildings, nursing their wounds and planning their next move. Jason and Laura led what remained of their team from Montana. Their safe house in the mountains had become a temporary headquarters, though it was far from secure. Supplies were running low, and morale was even lower. Every day brought news of more attacks, more losses. Yet Jason refused to let despair take hold. "We've come this far," he said during a meeting. "We're not giving up now." Laura nodded, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "If we can hit them where it hurts, we might still have a chance. But we'll need help. More people, more resources." Word spread through underground networks about the Resistance's determination. Survivors began trickling in, bringing stories of suffering and defiance. Some came with weapons, others with skills or knowledge. Among them was a former engineer named Matt, who offered to help improve the EMP devices. "I can make them stronger," he said confidently, "but I'll need time and materials." Jason immediately put him to work alongside Laura, knowing they couldn't afford to waste a single opportunity. Together, they dismantled old equipment, scavenging parts to build new weapons. Each improvement gave them a sliver of hope, a reminder that humanity still had something to fight for. In New York, Alina continued monitoring the Veyrak's movements, her eyes glued to screens filled with data. She discovered that the aliens' leader, the Overmind, was preparing to leave its flagship and oversee operations from a fortified base in Washington, D.C. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, one the Resistance couldn't afford to miss. "They're centralizing their command," she explained to Ryan over a secure line. "If we take out the Overmind, it could cripple their entire operation." Ryan's jaw tightened. "How do we get close enough to pull it off?" Alina hesitated before answering. "You'll need a distraction, a big one. Something to draw their attention away from the base long enough for you to infiltrate." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Then that's what we'll do." Plans were set into motion. Teams across the globe prepared for simultaneous assaults on key Veyrak facilities, creating chaos to mask the true objective. Striking at the heart of their leadership, Jason and Laura volunteered to lead a diversionary attack in Chicago, targeting a major power grid that supplied energy to the alien fleet. It was a suicide mission, but someone had to do it. As the day of the operation approached, Laura pulled Jason aside. "If something happens to me," she said quietly, "promise me you'll keep going. Don't let them win." Jason shook his head, his voice firm. "Nothing's happening to you. We're doing this together." The night of the attack, the Resistance struck with everything they had. Explosions rocked cities as teams deployed EMP devices and sabotage missions disrupted Veyrak supply lines. In Chicago, Jason and Laura fought their way through waves of enemies, planting explosives near the power grid. When the charges detonated, the resulting blast lit up the sky, temporarily disabling nearby ships. But the cost was high. During the retreat, Laura shielded Jason from incoming fire, taking a direct hit. She collapsed in his arms, blood staining her shirt. "Finish it," she whispered, her voice weak but resolute. "For all of us." Tears streamed down Jason's face as he held her, but there was no time to mourn. He carried her body to safety, vowing to honor her sacrifice. Around the world, the resistance pressed forward, their hearts heavy but their resolve unshaken. The final stand was coming, and they would face it head-on. For Laura, for Earth, and for the future they refused to surrender. The final assault on Washington, D.C. was a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance humanity had left. Jason led the remnants of his team toward the fortified base where the Overmind had taken residence. Every step felt heavier than the last, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of what they were about to attempt. Laura's sacrifice burned in his mind, fueling his determination. He couldn't let her death, or the deaths of so many others, be in vain. Ryan and Elena joined forces with the Montana group for this mission, knowing that their combined skills would be crucial. Ryan carried a handheld EMP device modified by Matt, its power amplified enough to disable even the most advanced Verac defenses, if they could get close enough to use it. Elena stayed behind in a hidden van, monitoring communications and guiding them through enemy lines. Her voice crackled over their radios, calm but urgent. "You're almost there," she said, "but the perimeter is heavily guarded." As they approached the base, the scale of the Verac's operation became clear. Towering walls surrounded the compound, patrolled by armored aliens carrying weapons that glowed ominously. Inside, strange machines hummed with energy, and the air shimmered with an invisible force field. Jason studied the layout carefully, searching for a way in. "We'll have to split up," he whispered. "Create diversions while one team goes for the Overmind." Ryan nodded, his expression grim. "I'll take the EMP device. You keep them busy." Jason hesitated, wanting to argue, but he knew Ryan was right. The former FBI agent had the training and focus needed for such a high-stakes task. "Just don't die out there," Jason said finally. "We've lost too many already." With a nod, Ryan slipped away, moving silently toward the heart of the base. Jason and the others launched their diversion, setting off small explosives near the outer walls. The blasts drew the attention of the guards, who scrambled to respond. Chaos erupted as more explosions followed, giving Ryan the opening he needed. Inside the compound, Ryan moved cautiously, avoiding patrols and disabling security systems with tools provided by Elena. His heart pounded as he reached the central structure, where the Overmind awaited. The alien leader was unlike anything he'd seen before, a towering figure encased in shimmering armor, its presence radiating power and menace. Surrounding it were rows of enslaved humans, hooked up to machines that seemed to drain their life force. "This ends now," Ryan muttered under his breath, clutching the EMP device tightly. He activated it, holding his breath as a low hum filled the air. The Overmind turned, sensing the disruption, and raised a clawed hand. Before it could react, the device emitted a blinding pulse of energy. The force field around the Overmind flickered and collapsed, sending shockwaves through the building. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed as the Verac scrambled to respond. Ryan didn't wait. He charged forward, aiming for the Overmind. The alien roared, its voice shaking the very ground beneath his feet. Ryan fired his weapon, striking the creature repeatedly, but its armor absorbed most of the damage. Desperation took over as he hurled the EMP device directly at the Overmind, triggering another pulse. This time, the effect was devastating. The Overmind staggered, its armor cracking as the electromagnetic surge overwhelmed its systems. It let out a deafening screech before collapsing, its massive form crumpling to the ground. Around it, the machine sputtered and died, freeing the captive humans. Outside, Jason and his team fought fiercely to hold their position. When the skies above them suddenly darkened, they braced for the worst. only to see the Varric ships begin to falter. One by one, they plummeted from the sky, their systems failing without the Overmind's control. Cheers erupted among the resistance fighters as realization dawned. They had done it. But the victory came at a cost. Ryan emerged from the base injured but alive, dragging himself toward the others. Jason helped him stand, both men silent as they surveyed the destruction around them. The battle was won, but Earth bore scars that might never fully heal. Still, amidst the rubble and smoke, there was hope, a fragile, hard-earned hope that humanity could rebuild. And as the dust settled, Jason whispered words meant for Laura, though she wasn't there to hear them. "We did it. For you."